My father was a kind, gentle person who dedicated himself to education. He was an elementary school principal in the United States for over 15 years, active in the civil rights movement, marched with Dr. Martin Luther King, brought inner city kids into his suburban school to integrate it, set up interracial summer camps. He was all about people. He tried to spread his message to children, to teach them to be good and kind and care for each other. In the mid 80s, my parents decided to move to Israel. We moved to Israel and they restarted their lives here in Jerusalem. They set up a small school teaching English to children in Jerusalem in small groups, Jews, Muslims, Christians. It didn't matter to them. It was all about the kids and educating them. Later in life, he wrote a wonderful book on education called Teaching is an Act of Love. The tagline was Every Child a Miracle, taking basically his 40 years of experience and relaying it on to others. Dad was also involved in all sorts of coexistence movements here in Israel. 2 weeks ago, he was riding on a public bus on his way back from a regular doctor's appointment when two terrorists got on the bus, shot him in the head, stabbed him in the face, and split his entire stomach wide open, cutting his liver and his pancreas and his intestines into pieces. He was rushed to Hadassah Hospital in Ein Kerem, where the staff, the nurses, the doctors did a wonderful job, everything they could trying to save his life. He laid unconscious in intensive care for 2 weeks, and I sat by his side, but they weren't able to save him. He died 2 days ago. Dad was murdered by terrorists brutally on bus 78 in Jerusalem. And I guess you're gathered in Boston, in his memory, and I'm touched, and I appreciate that, and it's wonderful that you've reached out that way. And Dad grew up in Newton, had a very close tie to the Jewish community there, was a member of Temple Emeth. My grandfather was one of the founders, Harry Lakin, of Temple Emeth and of the Solomon Schechter Day School in the area. They're very active in the United Synagogue. Later, Dad went on to Boston University and was an active member of the student community there before moving on to Michigan and then Connecticut. And this tragedy is a horrible, horrific tragedy, obviously, for our family, for his 8 grandchildren, my 2 daughters, who are 1 and 2 years old, who'll never get to see their grandfather. As they grow up, they'll never get to know him, this wonderful educator. And it's a terrible tragedy for the country. And I think it's a tragedy for the Jewish community and the community in Boston. And I want to thank you for taking the time to get together and think about him and respecting his memory. And it really means a lot to us. Over the past 2 weeks, we received thousands of emails and phone calls from people all over the world. And I was touched to receive emails and Facebook messages from people in Boston, people who recognized him from elementary school and hadn't been in touch with him, families who knew my grandparents. It was just wonderful. And the support was tremendous for us and our family. It really helped us get through. And I really want to thank you for that support. And I know Dad was socially active. Anything he was involved in, he was trying to make the world a better place and influence the people around him. And while his life was dedicated to spreading a positive message of kindness, and he really believed if you smile at somebody, they'll smile back. And if you reach your hand out to them, they'll reach back. And he abhorred hatred. He fought against it wherever he could, whether it was 2 children bullying another child in the schoolyard, or Jews and Arabs fighting each other. And one of the things that we've seen over the past few months, and certainly focused on the past few weeks as we sat by Dad in the hospital, is the tremendous amount of incitement going on in the internet. We've looked at social media, these new countries that have evolved, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. In these countries, they're lawless. The day after Dad was attacked on that bus, the Hamas placed a reenactment video on YouTube demonstrating what a quote-unquote wonderful job they did butchering Israelis, inciting and recommending other Hamasniks to do the same, and giving the lessons of the terrible act that they did. And that's still up on YouTube almost 3 weeks later. It's a lawless country. If you would put up a sign in Boston and say, let's go murder Jews and here's how to do it, or let's go murder another minority and here's how to do it, and put their names and show their houses and give explanations of how to act that out, the sign would be taken down immediately. Everybody involved with it would be arrested and thrown in jail. But in the country called YouTube, it's a free-for-all. There are no laws. And I think one of the messages that comes out of this whole thing is, while social media is a powerful, powerful tool, which Dad used to promote his educational ideals. He had over 4,500 followers on Twitter. He was exceptionally active on Facebook and other forms of social media. it's also a danger, and it needs to be controlled, and that's something that people need to deal with. And I think one of his messages would be, how do we use social media for positive educational purposes, and not for hatred and incitement. And again, I want to thank you all for taking the time to get together and for praying for him and thinking about his memory. It means a lot to us, and we really, really appreciate it. Shalom.